look at this knife right here, huh? Look at that junker. Ugh. You could probably find one of these at the Salvation Army or Goodwill, across the nation. You'd probably just walk right by it too. You wouldn't care. But what does that say on the bottom there? What does that say? It says Gerber. Yeah, it's definitely a Gerber, huh? Actually, there's something really special about this knife. There's the model name right there, the Durundle. And the really special ones have this sword right here. What does that mean? Well, basically, this knife right here has M2 tool steel at a really high hardness. What's significant about that? Well, let's factor in that this knife came out in the late 60s, early 70s. It was probably one of the first knives to really introduce, carbon tool steel to a mass audience. So they made hunting knives like this, they made some kitchen knives, but also what's really, really cool about this knife is that it also has a hard chrome plating on the outside right here. M2 tool steel, as you know, is a carbon tool steel. It's going to rust. It doesn't actually have chromium inside there. It has enough for it to harden, but it doesn't actually have enough significant free chromium to prevent the, rust from forming on the blade. So by putting this hard chrome jacket on the outside, it behaves a lot like something you'll find on a high-end Japanese kitchen knife, like a Sanmai construction. This is actually forged with a softer jacket of stainless steel. This is a super blue steel, and you can see right there, right where the lamination line is exposed, that's where the high carbon steel is, and this has got a patina. What that does is it significantly cuts down on the maintenance of the knife. At the same time, you still get the really awesome sharpenability and toughness of a carbon steel. So that's why that is so cool. I know some people they can't really wrap their mind around it. They're like, why would I want the stainless on the outside? The edge is still going to rust. Well, yeah, but at the same time, I mean, if you're using your stuff and tweaking your edges and stuff like that, you shouldn't have to worry about that. This is cool. This knife is older than I am, and you could see how well that has held up. I mean, this edge is shredded, but I think it's really cool. I borrowed this from a friend, so you could see how well that's held up. There's been talk, basically, of people geeking out and saying that the hard chrome plating on the outside will increase the galvanic corrosion, so you'll basically get rust in between the tool steel and the plating. It'll kind of rust from the edge in, or rust from the inside out. But that doesn't seem to be the case. You can see they also hard chrome plated the handles here, and we've got some plating chipping out right there. Really, really cool. Some more background information about this knife, actually, is that these are infamous, like absolutely horrible to sharpen. This is probably the worst sharpening knife I've ever come across. Why is that, you ask? Well, the heat treat. So they weren't doing phenomenal stuff with the heat treating, especially on knives back then. It was really just kind of get it hot and stick it in oil, kind of stuff like that. But the grain structure of this steel is super huge. It's just super clumpy. And as you know, what makes a knife super tough and super easy to sharpen and take that killer keen edge is the finest grain structure, finest carbide structure possible. So you're not going to get that on this knife. So in that aspect, this knife was a huge flop. Nobody could sharpen it. They had such a hard time putting a really, really keen edge. It really, all this knife wants is a super toothy edge. That's it. It's like a saw blade because the really clumpy structure of the tool steel. You got to remember, that's really the huge benefit to the powdered steel, so particle metallurgy, is that you have the ability to break up those segregated carbide networks, so you don't have these huge lumpy pieces, clumps inside the steel that prevent you from sharpening it really, really well. So really, really cool. It's funny because not only did they do M2 tool steel, they also did a steel called Vascoware. They were kind of one of the first progenitors of using that steel, which, if you know anything about Vascoware, the history of it is that's what eventually came to be crewware. And crewware actually wasn't powdered until, the 2000s. So it's really kind of cool to have such a history, such a legacy right here of this Gerber blade. And I just thought it was really, really sweet. Borrowed that from a buddy. So yeah, back in the day, Gerber actually used to be awesome. Today, Gerber is horrible. Probably the only cool thing they make is the Gerber center drive, which is a decent, multi-tool. But when it comes to actual cutting performance, like cutting edge steels and awesome edge performances and stuff like that, you're never going to find that with a Gerber. Just run away. I hope Gerber changes this attitude and this, the way that they do stuff, but I don't think so. I think that they're just too busy cashing in on newer people to knives or people that just don't care. But they have a product for a really, really low price point that, sells to that kind of audience. But yeah, back in the day, Gerber used to be cutting edge, man. All right, guys, take it easy.